From the Toronto Star, I'm Saba Itazaz, and this matters. Canada's most globally known aspect is the ease and openness of its immigration system. It forms the very basis of our image of a multicultural country welcoming newcomers. Now, that image, the immigration system, and those trying to navigate it are all facing a crisis. The pandemic, travel restrictions, and the more recent refugee crisis in Afghanistan has created some serious lack of order within Canada's immigration system. From refugees to permanent residency holders trying to make their landing in Canada, to those already living in the country waiting for citizenship, everyone has been in limbo as the backlog keeps piling up. To try and address some of this, earlier this year, the federal government announced a special one-time immigration program as a potential pathway to permanent residency. This was a program with a limited time window, limited slots for applicants, and for thousands of students and workers, their only chance to make a life here. To qualify, they needed to jump a lot of hoops and navigate a tricky system, all in the middle of a pandemic. And now many of those who made it even that far are in danger of losing all their dreams, all because of a computer glitch. How does that happen, and what does this mean for those whose whole future was depending on this Canadian dream? The Star's immigration reporter Nicholas Keung has been reporting on this, and he joins me now to explain. Hi, Nicholas. It's great to have you again.
Hi, Saba. Thanks for having me on your show.
So let's start off with a quick recap on the one-time immigration program and why it was introduced, just for background.
Of course. During the pandemic, due to the travel restrictions and lockdown of visa offices, few immigrants could come to Canada. Meanwhile, many of the international graduates and migrant workers have worked on the front line as essential workers. So whether it's at local gas stations or stuffing grocery shelves, they were there on the front line. In May, the immigration minister wrote out the one-time special program to grant permanent residence to international graduates and essential workers already in Canada, both to make up the immigration shortfall and as a goodwill to recognize the temporary residence contributions to Canada during the crisis.
And who has it been helping so far who is supposed to be eligible for this?
There were different streams for international graduates who actually paid tens of thousands of dollars in tuition fee for online courses the last year and a half in Canada. Also, the essential workers in meat plants, farm workers, those who work on assembly line, and in healthcare, such as personal support workers. All these groups, actually were eligible to these different streams.
And Nicholas, we've talked about this before, about the challenges of navigating the system that was set up for so many applicants. And the process wasn't really easy from the start. I remember one of your earlier pieces, you followed an applicant trying to go through this process, right?
Yeah, exactly. All the streams actually under the one-time pathway program are divided between English and French streams due to the government's push to attract French-speaking immigrants. And one of the challenges is the fact that all the English streams all have caps and applications must be submitted online. There are only 40,000 spots for international graduates, 30,000 spots for essential workers, and 20,000 for healthcare workers. Normally, lawyers will be able to help prepare the applications that are filed, but because everything is straightly online, so applicants actually had to do everything on their own in front of their computers. And given it's COVID-19, so there's physical distancing and a lot of law offices actually closed. So basically the applicants were on their own. And because of the caps in the English streams, so those applicants were competing against one another and they're racing against time to secure a spot. Once they're filled, because once those programs are filled, they stopped taking in new applications. It was a sue.
Right. So this is like a one-time program with a limited time window, like you said, limited slots as well. And you mentioned racing against time. So most applicants are basically kind of in a race for their future. And meanwhile, now there might also be some kind of glitch in the system. Tell me a little bit about what's going on for some of the applicants.
So 4 months have passed, and immigration officials began processing and finalizing some of the applications. Some applicants now are receiving refusal letters. So what is weird is, immigration in the refusal letter told them they were refused because they didn't include their French language test results. But these are the people who claim to have applied under the English streams. So on social media now, we are seeing other applicants saying they noticed in their immigration applications account, in their immigration application account, that their applications are being placed under a French stream. They haven't been refused yet, but it's causing a lot of concerns.
And what are they going to do now? Can you give me an example of what it's like for someone facing this situation? And at the same time, there's all this pressure, there's a pandemic, and they're desperate to, make things work for them in Canada.
So this temporary residence to permanent residence pathway program is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for many of these applicants because the eligibility bar is much lower. The qualifying occupations are broader. The language proficiency requirement is less restrictive. So if one meets all those basic requirements and can provide proofs for it, it's a sure in as long as you submitted the application fast enough. So I spoke with this young international graduate from the University of Regina who has been stuck in restaurant jobs and as customer service rep during the pandemic because he wasn't able to get a job in computer science, which is his, academic background. So even though he didn't have a fancy job, he still qualified for this pathway. And for him, because he in Regina there wasn't a language test center, so in order to meet the language requirement, he had to drive 8 hours one way just to sit for a language test in Edmonton, which is the closest test center. And he found out recently that he was processed under the French international graduate stream. He was heartbroken, because when he tried to remedy the situations, he called, his MP, he called immigration, pretty much there was nothing they could do for him. And his postgraduate work permit will expire in a couple of years if he still can't get a quote unquote good job in computer science that would make him qualify for permanent residence under other programs. He's doomed and must leave Canada.
We'll be right back. And this is not just one experience, because we could say that could have been some kind of mistake. But you mentioned in your report there are several people who have come up against the same issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was part of this WhatsApp group, and when I joined, there were already 50 people in similar situation on that group, and it's growing too. So for most of them, when they contacted immigration, they suggested that, the applicants must have checked the wrong stream from the drop-down menu. But the applicants everyone stood by the fact that they submitted their applications under the English streams. And it's interesting, in all those cases, it's the same thing. They all apply to the English streams, but being processed, as a French applicants. So I looked at, some of the confirmation letters from immigration, that acknowledged the receipt of those applications. And they all appeared to have submitted before the cutoff time when the caps were reached in those streams. Given this was a life-changing opportunity for these applicants to get permanent residence, is a pretty huge mistake that they would have made. What's also interesting is that some of the refused applicants pointed out that the government portal actually had an error at one point during the application process. And what happened was, the cap of 40,000 under the international graduate stream was already filled, but the system still kept taking in applications. So what ended up happening was the immigration department had agreed to process all 47,300 applications under that program before they identified the glitch in the processing. So could it be a glitch, computer glitch, or was it just human errors on the applicant's part? It's really hard to tell. I hate technology. I'm old-fashioned and I don't know. I'm not a big fan of technology.
Yeah, it's also, I would think the probability would not be that high for that many people to make this mistake on what is kind of an application deciding their future. So I would guess there would be a lot of diligence on that front. And you're talking about issues in the system from before this as well. So what do those people who've been refused, who've come up with this, is there any recourse for them to fight this? Are there any sort of legal solutions that they can look towards?
Yeah, so far, at least one refused applicant has taken his case to the court to ask for a judicial review of the refusal on the grounds that the computer portal has made a mistake. I spoke with the lawyer. He feels his client actually has a very strong case because throughout the application submission process, the client was closely monitored by an immigration consultant to make sure everything was filled out properly, all the I's were dots, and all the T's were crossed, and was sure no mistakes were made. I know other lawyers are actually receiving similar inquiries from others in the same situation as well.
So these are people who have access to lawyers to try and help with this, but not everyone would have that kind of access or resources or time to be able to seek that kind of help in these situations, right? Especially those who might be up against bigger socioeconomic barriers, for instance.
Unfortunately, litigation is costly. Just an hour of consultation can cost $300. And this kind of matters before the court usually is not covered by legal aid as well. So these are the people, these applicants are the people who are doing essential work, but essential work doesn't mean well-paid work, well-paid jobs. Some may consider pursuing legal recourse, but not everyone can afford to do so, for sure.
So has there been any response from immigration officials on this?
Yeah, I reached out to the immigration department. It suggested that these applicants must have made a mistake, and they are quite adamant that they would be assessed against those criteria of the stream that they picked from the drop-down menu in the portal. Essentially, they're saying that, I'm sorry, but, there's no way we could, it's your fault, it's not ours. But what is interesting, though, there are at least two places in the application portal. There are at least two places where an applicant was asked to pick which stream they were applying under. One is when they log in and they opened the portal and they would be immediately asked, the first question they asked is through the drop-down menu to check, to pick from there the stream that they're applying under. And then later in one of the actual application forms that they have to fill out, they are asked again to check one of the boxes, there are actually 6 boxes, 3 English streams and 3 French streams where they, again, being asked to check those boxes. The few application forms that I've seen, the people in the second form, it was checked, correctly. So my question is, if the machine or immigration officials not review or flag it, if an applicant checked 2 different streams through the application process, both in the form and in the portal, is there no, whether the machine doesn't check or, immigration officials do not check, if there's any inconsistency, should not someone actually spot it and, reach out to the applicants to confirm and at least to remedy, at that first point?
That's a very good point, Nicholas. And I know you've been writing about this for a while. There have been a number of crises we've seen, including the recent situation in Afghanistan and obviously the pandemic. And this is just one section, but it's a bit of a mess in the various immigration and refugee streams recently as well. I know there were issues with backlog on a number of fronts as well. So that's also ongoing, right, for anyone trying to move to or stay in Canada?
Honestly, I think Canada's immigration system is in crisis. There's a growing backlogs. You don't have one single happy applicant. It's hard to find, to be honest. As you said, there are backlogs in various immigration programs. I think actually all immigration programs, there's long delays, citizenship applications, and you name it. So absolutely, there are a lot of disgruntled immigration applicants out there. Disgruntled newcomers make disgruntled permanent residents, and disgruntled permanent residents make disgruntled Canadians. I don't think the country actually wants or need more disgruntled people, disgruntled Canadians down the road, not during a pandemic.
Right, especially with immigration targets to fulfill as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for your time and for sharing your reporting and insights as usual.
Thanks again, as always, having me, Saba.
I was talking to the Star's immigration reporter, Nicholas Keung. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, Saba Itazaz. The This Matters team is Adrian Chung, Brian Bradley, JP Fozo, Matt Hearn, Morgan Bucknick, Raju Mudhar, and Sean Pattenton. Our music is by So-Called, Mike DeAngelis, and Sean Pattenton. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star Newsroom does at thestar.com/subscribing matters. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.